Hi, and welcome to a Small Medium at Large podcast. I'm your host, Gail Heisen, bringing you intimate stories that heal. I want to thank all you listeners for supporting us, watching us on YouTube, listening to us on Spotify, and all the other channels that carry podcasts. And we're coming up, we're starting into we've done over 40 shows now, and we really appreciate you sticking by us. Love the comments that come in. Today, I'm going to start off a little different than we've done ever before by reading a poem. I'm going to read a poem here today that was sent in by someone who started off as a listener, who my first guest in 2021, Sally Rhinefeather. She had a friend named Peggy Pulver, and Peggy and Pulver and I got connected by email through her, and we have been friends ever since. And Peggy sends me some of her poetry, and we write back and forth to each other, and she lives in Canada. So today I wanted to share a poem that she wrote that I'm very honored she said was inspired by listening to my shows and getting to know me. So here is her poem. It's titled From Kundalini to Mind Caress. You are akin to a warm thought, or friendly face and now familiar image, appearing in my mind, and he is too. And him and another, the other side of the pond. And down south in Texas, and a much-loved son. Or two, the cherished sense of person to person, connection, and some sigh links our voices. Once upon a time, extant, though now located elsewhere, in the unknown beyond verifiable comprehension, but recalled by mind's hearing sense, they elicit memories of sensual pleasure, unforgettable moments of erotic touch, and formidable human support, the sort one feels from friends and rare lovers, these exceptions not the rule when depth and strength of pure spirit infuse a soul, persona, allows overflow, to encompass and surround one's being in an anomaly occurs. Maybe this is not uncommon after all, but oft times one endures. For a half a lifetime of busy years before that moment comes, when one encounters some prescient personality and you know it. You recognize a psychic touch or impact through the finer senses of miraculous wonder, feelings of contentment and fulfillment, and then again, a similar infusion of felt sensation. Or ecstasy might arise to thrill one's being all of a sudden, cloaked in anonymity, coming from a source after hand or perhaps far off and nowhere known, invisible yet empowered. If you are fortunately aware, open and accepting love from Kundalini to a mind caress or hugs. Thank you so much, Peggy Pulver. I'm just honored that I somehow inspired such a beautiful poem. Thank you. So now I'm going to go on to our show and talk about our special guest today. Our special guest today is Gwynn O'Gara, and I want to tell you a little bit about her. Gwynn O'Gara is a Northern California poet with roots in the natural world, beat poetry, and her early years in Mexico. Gwynn O'Gara found her voice performing in San Francisco's North Beach, and her first book, Snake Woman Poems, was celebrated at City Lights Bookstore in 1983. Gwynn was honored to serve as Sonoma County Poet Laureate from 2010 to 2011. As a California poet in the schools, she explored the joys and mysteries of written and recited poetry with children, teens, and adults. She is published in Paddlefish and the Comstock Review. O'Gara's work also appears in anthologies, including Beetude's Silver and Gold editions, Sisters Born, Sisters Found, and Pillow, Exploring the Heart of Eros. Her chapbooks include Fixer Upper, Winter at Greenhaven, and Sea Cradles. She makes her home under the redwoods and the fruit trees here in Sonoma County. So let's welcome Gwynn here today. Hi, Gwynn.
Hi,
How
Gail.
are you?
Thank you so much for having me here.
There's one other thing I wanted to announce that I didn't have here in our bio, which is that today we're going to be having poetry from the book we spoke about, Snake Woman Poems, but we'll also be doing poetry from your newest book, which was just released, I think, just a couple months ago.
Yes, mid-January.
In January,
Yeah.
We Who Dream. I absolutely love the title. I think it's a great title. So welcome here to A Small Medium at Large podcast.
Thank
You're
you.
our first poet that we've had.
Oh, great.
Our first show dedicated completely to poetry.
Wonderful. I'm honored.
So
may there be more.
Yes, and now the first thing we always start off with is the beginning. When you were growing up as a child, were you someone who wrote poetry then, or did you have a passion then where, like, I wrote a few poems when I was 7 or 10 or 12, and that was it. I never wrote any more poetry after that.
Yeah.
But was that something you started young and continued on for your rest of your life?
I definitely. The earliest one I found after my mother passed was a love poem to her that I
Oh,
wrote when I was 8 years old. And I always wrote. My father was a newspaper reporter, and my mother had written advertising, and she was a voracious reader. And so language was really important in our house, how you pronounced words, that you used proper grammar. They joyed in it. They
wow.
honored it. And I remember we had an apartment in San Francisco, and my father had a little office, which was basically a storage room. So I wrote a poem, and it was at the bottom of a light well. Not everyone knows what a light well is, but it lets light into the interior of a building. It's just an opening, and often with windows around it from various apartments. And his was at the bottom of a light well. And I remember when I was really young, 4 or so, going down the back stairs in the fog and through the dark basement, and the witch that was really Mops, but frightened the hell out of me. And and his office, and receiving the light. That's where the light of being came into me. Or I remember, oh yeah, this is for me. This is going to be part of my life. So
And how beautiful that your parents really helped in the forming of your passion by encouraging you to use words in the proper way, unlike myself, but
yeah, well, language is language. We use it, and
yes,
that's the important thing. If we
exactly.
don't know the right word, we make it up, and that's a beautiful thing.
So did you start collecting poems, and when you were in school, did you find English, and were you excelling there and getting encouragement from your teachers at the time?
I always got encouragement. I was pretty good at math, too, but I loved literature. So, and poetry, and I read a lot. And, that's where, especially by the time you get to high school, a passion shows. And so I was lucky to have good teachers who venerated the written word and helped me progress and guided me and just encouraged me. That was it. Encouraged from the heart, encouraged me. Keep going.
And so I'm thinking that same encouragement that you got from these teachers is what you brought to your work when you went into schools to teach with young children as well as adults, to inspire them, so that it's sort of like a nice flow that's going through from one generation into the next generation, and you're part of passing that on.
Absolutely. You've got it exactly. I have a poem that's about that.
Let's hear it.
Yeah. It's called Poetry Teacher, because I was a Cal poet for over 25 years, and I loved it. It gave me so much joy. I was very lucky. Well, before I read the poem, I'll tell you, helping kids write poetry gave them so much power.
Mhm.
And it was hard for many. They never thought about it. They had been taught to write properly or from the outside, or maybe a report or an essay, but trying to express feelings or observations or what they considered beautiful could be a challenge. Some people, they were just waiting all their lives to be encouraged, go ahead and write. And one student I remember in juvenile hall, I talked about poetry. One of the things we do in poetry is we praise. We praise life. We praise our ancestors, our teachers, our parents, whomever, the beautiful day. And I had to distinguish, because he didn't know this word. Many of them didn't know the word praise, praise. They
Mhm.
knew about the homophone, praying. And so that opened a door. And he wrote a poem praising his mother that was so beautiful. And you could tell that he had something had changed within him. And he had a line now that he wasn't going to cross, and that he was going to make where he was bigger and bigger and better and better. It was just beautiful. And he could give the poem to his mother. I mean, fantastic.
That's such beautiful teaching work. Some teachers have changed people's lives by the things that they've done and how important they are. Even though they're underpaid, they're rewarded
Yes.
another way. And I
Yes.
do have to say, it's very funny because I was rereading your poems before having you on this morning,
Mhm.
and that is exactly the last poem I read.
Ah.
And when I read it, the one thing I
Uh-huh.
want to say before you read it is that you say such powerful information with so few words.
Mm.
And I'm working on the finale of my book, and I wished I'd know how to do that.
It's hard. Sometimes I work a poem over, I just kill it. I
I'm-
just take the heart out, and then
oh,
it's gone. So yeah, I'm still learning too. What
well,
to leave, what to
that this particular poem you're going to read, I felt really the words are powerful, and I understood everything that you were expressing about this teaching. So let's
Good.
share that with our audience.
Great. It's called Poetry Teacher. You want to say, don't worry about being fat. What gives you the greatest joy? Don't get into the car when your mother's drunk. Go easy with the weed. Don't let fear of imagined reactions stop you. Sometimes you have to be the parent. God, I hope you're using birth control. Your attitude sucks. You're going to break down and smash something, probably yourself. Your loneliness frightens me. Don't join the military just yet. I'm sorry your mother died. I'm sorry your father doesn't talk with you. Just wait. Someday someone will understand you. How many people did it take to make you this angry? Who told you you were garbage? But what you say is, keep writing.
I feel like that poem should be given out to all these junior high school and high school teachers in English and
Mhm,
say, kids, here, check this poem out. Does this resonate with you?
mhm,
Because you captured all of the difficulties, I think, that go on in a high school
mhm,
for the students. And
mhm.
I would think that that would really make them start to feel that, wow, poetry can express what I'm feeling inside.
Yeah. For teachers too. I had to call Bill Rosenfeld, my college professor, and say, I'm overwhelmed by these students and their lives. This was in middle school, junior high. And
Mhm.
he said, steady on. You can't really help with their lives, but you can help them with their lives through poetry. And that's what you're there to do. And I needed that clarity and that line. So that really helped me. Yeah.
It's wonderful that you've had great teachers and support and community.
Yes, yes.
I know that you do have poetry readings around Sonoma County, and I've been to some of them, and you have a wonderful response and rapport with the audience.
Yeah, I love to read. I mean, obviously.
Well, I'm excited for our next one.
Okay,
So, would you like to share another poem before we have another question?
sure, I'd love to.
Okay, that would be great.
Yeah. We talked through emails about poetry being a healing art, and in the writing of it, it's all, I think healing and writing and poetry are about transformation.
Mhm.
We want change. We need change. Sometimes we're not conscious of this, but change has to happen. And this poem is called Rhythm, because sometimes, well, you'll see.
And both of these are coming out of your new book.
Yes,
We
out
Who
of
Dream.
We Who Dream. Yeah, by
Yes.
Finishing Line Press. Thank you. It's available online, Finishing Line Press, and they were great. And they published. They really help poets with beautiful books. The paintings by Mark Milestone in Winston-Salem back east. I saw it at a museum in Baltimore in 2006. You'd probably like this museum. It's the American Visionary Art Museum.
Mm.
It's all untaught painters, although some, have a degree of skill we can recognize, but it's just a wonderful place. Wonderful. And of course I wanted the painting immediately. Somebody else owned it, but he was gracious. He was so gracious in sharing it for the book. So this is called Rhythm. Late afternoon, the dog comes to my study and rubs her closeness against me. Now, say her eyes, even the patient, no appetite, the dreamy wake to urgency. Among the trees, she greets old friends, exults in the warmth of a new hand. At home, I fill her bowl. So the heart finds where we hide among strangers or preoccupations and tells us it is time. Feed what is hungry, air what is stale. Pick up pen or phone and pronounce the words practiced so long in silence. Or lie down with the sun in the grass, neither bless nor curse, simply change.
Mm. Lovely, just lovely. And you read them so beautifully.
Thank you.
So since we're bringing up the idea about healing, and also since we're a show about healing stories, I was wondering, before I go into students and other people and healing stories that they might have to share that you've had in your classes, what is your own personal experiences like? Did you have different times in your life where, as life does, hands us different things we have to deal with that are heavy? Did poetry get you through some of these things? And do you have an example maybe of a poem you would read that was something that was what got you through, whether it was a loss of a person or some particular life situation?
I lost my father at a young age. My parents had a tempestuous relationship. She remarried, it didn't work out. And so in my teens especially is when I had to reckon with the loss of my father, because it happened fast and you keep going and you moved, we moved to Mexico and, life keeps going. It doesn't stop for us to grieve. And, when you're young, I didn't know anything. So I wrote a lot, and some of it was poetry, a lot of poetry. I mean, I've been a writer forever. So a lot of that was just healing. I have old journals, you just sob and write, but that helps you process it.
That's right.
Naming is putting feelings into words is a real power. And
Yes.
so that's helped me all along. And the book has different types. There's sexual healing, there's the healing of love, there's the healing, or at least the healing teaching of animals.
Mhm.
What I discovered was in Snake Woman poems, which is 40 years ago, 40 years old to this year, uh,
Wow.
was that it's a radical book, and the central poem is very long, and it's a retelling of the Adam and Eve myth, but through Snake Woman, who is a goddess, and she turns it upside down, and it involves magic mushrooms. And I was young, and I was green, and I was hungry for change because I had a lot still bottled up, 17. And the mushrooms really helped me. They awed me. Of course, the experience is
Mhm.
awe-inspiring. But they taught me that I was here and I deserved to be here, and that life would take care of me. That life would take care of me. This was enough. I didn't eat them very often, but that I had had enough. And you know what? That was true, because I still draw on what they taught me, lo these many years later.
Well, hey, now
Yeah.
40 years later, it's in mainstream media, and
Yes.
they're finding that microdosing is helping people with all kinds of situations,
Right.
PTSD, all
Right.
kinds of different physical things that are bothering
Right.
them, and they're clearing up people
Right.
sometimes with just one or two experiences.
Yes.
Today is our poetry day, so I would love if you would read that story. Do you
All
feel?
right. I'll,
Yeah,
I may not, it goes on and on. So I'll start it,
yes.
and
And
then
then they
I'll
can,
stop.
okay.
Yeah.
But I think that would be, especially hearing this is what you were, this is where you were growing in this. This is
Right.
the transformation was happening.
Yes. And I feel so grateful.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is called The Garden, Snake Woman's Song. Brother Adam, sister Eve, I offer you fruit of the laughing tree, so you can know death, and knowing death, know God, and knowing both, know who and what you are. I am wife to laughing tree, who laughs so hard in ecstasy, tears fall from his branches and land on my scales. Our children, the mushrooms, sprout from rot to bind the separation, praise dark as well as light. Human I am not, I plow forever. The sum of creation I am not, nor the maker, a goddess who has mated with and mothered all the gods. I know fruition and installment, rue and fury. Mine are the invisible lips of night that draw around you when you sleep. I juxtapose and bid you begin what you did not know you would.
Mhm.
It is I who tumble in rage when you are dry, I who send storms to excite you. Mine are the waters of change and oblivion, mine the stones of clarity and calm. All this you will find in the mushroom's moist flesh, bites of swimming earth.
Mm.
All this when you touch the forbidden, hold the unknowable.
We have a little more. I'm really
Oh,
enjoying this.
I'm, I'm so amazed. Anyway, mushrooms taste of salt and bark, tears and clay. Eat and join in full knowing. Strangers will call me devil serpent, and you sinners fallen, forgetting the trees wet laugh, ignoring our songs. Struggle stalls grace. You will discover texture in imperfection, where dreams and sleep separate. You are curious. I smell it in your sweat. You sense what you do not know. Come, eat, invite evolution. Flickerings between your lobes await epiphanies. You would obey God? I am that. in form you do not know. It goes on.
And it goes on.
And it goes on. And I could read, I mean, I could just, and that, yeah, a couple more pages.
I'd
Mm.
love to hear the rest.
Okay.
This,
All right.
and I think we have listeners who are experimenting with this sort of thing, and they'll really relate to the poem at the same time, I think.
Good. Great. Great.
And we're thinking 40 years ago is no different than this moment today.
No, no, yeah, yeah, okay.
It's a prophecy.
Yeah, I was a little early, but not
Yeah.
really. For me, I was on time, but
Right.
all right. Well, thank you. Thank you for this forum. As you have likened God to a man, take me for woman. I am all that he is not. Slow beauty of the desert, pleasure of enduring passion, satisfaction of untaught effort, cultivator of essentials, maker as well as giver of gifts. Without adventuring, you will be no more than monkeys in the fruit abounding trees. Both of you eat a pear, one man and woman each. They are strongest together. They will help you examine rather than accept. They will let you wonder instead of fear. You will cogitate instead of vegetate, invent instead of rest, create instead of cower. You will grow strong from reaching, hardy from aching, brave from trusting the power in your hands and brain. Ages from now, you will find God again inside you, holding two snakes in your hands, one for the God of him, one for the God of her. Remember us, who fear will make enemies, maker, giver, monster, father, visible, invisible. Your vision will join us. There, you have eaten. Remember to praise, or you will forget how to sing. Protect serpents, or you will compete with rodents. Invoke snake woman, or you will marry fear. Hug laughing tree, or you will beg stones for water.
That's beautiful. That's not long at all. I could when you were talking about a snake in each hand, I could see the image.
And thank you for all that. But this summer, I learned a new constellation. You know about the constellation called Ophiuchus?
No, but tell us
It's the
about it.
serpent bearer. And it's been identified as a constellation for over 4,000 years. It's in the southwestern late summer autumn sky between Scorpius and Sagittarius, below Hercules and southwest of Bootes. And it's kind of a long rectangle, ahead, and the serpents. And Ophiuchus, there's a great story. The Greeks took him for Asclepius, who was their legendary healer and who was the 15th great grandfather of Hippocrates. Okay, so we're talking about Asclepius. We're talking about Ophiuchus, who's a healer. And accidentally one day, he kills a snake. He's stunned, do no harm is a long time saying. So he doesn't know what to do. And another snake comes with green leaves in its mouth and feeds the dead snake, who comes back to life. Is it any wonder I love the green world, or we love and we need the green world? So this is great. Ophiuchus is healing people right and left, and he's bringing back people from the dead. Well, things are going well, except Hades, king of the underworld, is not happy. Business is slowing down. He's got time on his hands. Well, he doesn't like it. So, and he's got real competition. He doesn't like it. So he goes to Zeus, king of the gods, father of the gods, and said, "You've got to do something, brother. This is, this is messing the balance of things." And so Zeus doesn't quite kill Ophiuchilus, but he makes him a constellation. He puts him in the night sky, in the southwestern sky, and gives him a constellation.
Great story.
So that's, the caduceus that the physicians use is one snake. That's a different myth. But this, sometimes you see I think it's the rod of Hermes. You see the two snakes. That's what this is related to. Yeah. So
That's a great story.
isn't it wild? Yeah. And it used to be the Babylonians, it was the 13th house of the zodiac. And, in history, somebody was tidying up and they dropped it. But some people, certain astrologers, still refer to Ophiuchilus as a constellation, as a house of the zodiac.
So it would be, instead of 12, which is
Yeah.
supposed to reflect on the months of the year, it
Yes.
was 13. I wonder if there was ever a time when there were actually 13 months of the year instead of 12.
Well, the lunar months.
Oh, so it's lunar.
So, yeah. So I think that's where we're at.
Ah, well, we were talking about the healing experience you had with your dad and being able to write through the loss and grieving. What about when you've taught your students from, say, children to adults? Are there a story or two that you could share where through this, that they had this healing kind of experience and you saw them transform, or you saw or the seeds began to start their transformation?
I think so. There were a couple of students, we live, I don't have to tell you, you're in the country. We live in a semi-rural area. It's a fabulous place. And the schools I taught in our town were in town. Okay. And there was a little bit of a rift between, even in middle school and somewhat grade school, but especially high school, between what we might townies and the country. Sometimes they called them hicks. I hated that when I discovered that. Anyway. So, but some of these students were very they'd write about waking up before dawn to feed the animals. Or their parents saying, before you eat breakfast, you go feed the animals. And they were quite self-conscious about that. And one kid, he woke up early to go duck hunting. Hunting isn't, in the Groovy Tunes universe, that isn't popular. But they each could write about something that needs to be written about, that is important, and they wrote about it so well. And so I would counsel them and tell them, you're lucky. You don't know it, but you're lucky to live with animals. Yeah, you have a lot of work, but it's part of who we are as humans. And they kept writing about, I actually saw at the Sonoma County Fair, I saw two of my students, because I used to love to go through the barns with the beasts in them. Because these were the most loved and petted and brushed and well-fed and cared for beasts. And one student had her huge black sheep, and she had won some ribbon. And then I got to see another student parade her young heifer around a corral. And it was so, for me, that was my story. I could see these young women in their element and getting praise or recognition and acknowledgement for what they were doing, which they so deserved. It was just, and so, I drive around and I look at the cows and I think, oh, another lifetime, maybe.
So I guess you were more of a townie.
Yeah, definitely. A dog or a cat, if you were lucky, fish, turtle, that kind of thing. But I see.
So were they able to then express what it was like through poetry of, that their day started differently than, say, a classmate they were sitting next to?
Yes. And they could be, they didn't have a toot about it, but they could be proud of themselves. They could say, yes, we deserve to be here. We're no less than anybody else. And we have gifts that maybe they don't understand.
Right.
They don't have, yeah.
And now when you taught adults, where did you do that?
I did it through, well, at the Sebastopol Center for the Arts,
Hmm.
many years ago. And I ran my own workshop, sometimes in our living room.
Hmm.
And when I was poet laureate, groups would ask me to come and teach a workshop or join in with a workshop, that kind of thing. So around the county, mostly around Sonoma
So
County.
that's wonderful. You
That
got
was
to
so great.
read, you got to read and hear poetry
Yes,
from people living amongst you,
yes,
them
yeah.
having experience of learning to express themselves in a way that they may never have done before.
Yes, and some of them are really good too, or not that even the new one. I mean, so I got to hear, wonderful poems and encourage them, yeah. And how we had fun. I tried to always make it fun,
That's
because yeah.
that's real. That's very wonderful. Very, very, very wonderful. Uh, I the couple little poems that I ever wrote as a child, the haiku and some little things, I've never forgotten those little words, and they
Uh-huh.
stay with you, and there's
Yes,
meaning to that. And
yes,
I've,
wonderful.
I've always felt like I don't understand poetry, but when I was reading your book, I was saying, wait a minute, I understand what she's saying here.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to write like that, but I really understand her message.
Uh-huh. Well, haiku, I love writing haiku or trying to write haiku. And you're writing your memoirs, correct?
Mhm.
Sometimes, a poem, even a haiku or a few lines of poetry can stop the action, but open it into the larger space-time con- continuum. And that
Right.
might help you, that might just be a way through something unsayable
Mhm.
in prose.
Yes, I've finished most of it. I'm just now in the end, which is my experiences of Mongolia and being initiated
Mm,
as a Mongolian shaman.
mm,
There's so much material, and I'm trying to shrink it down and shrink it
mm.
down.
Uh-huh.
And so
Oh,
anyway, I'm learning that process,
yeah.
and it's very
Uh-huh.
interesting to learn how to say things in a shorter manner instead of having a lot of extra words that don't need to be there.
Yeah.
That's really that's a good thing. So then have you had relationships, or did any of your students end up becoming friends of yours, or any kind of, do you see anyone like for periods of time where you've gotten to watch how their poetry transformed or
Uh,
gotten better, or
well, some students I taught for many years because I would stay,
ah
I'd have residencies. So I would get to see them get better and better. But one thing, I haven't stayed friends. One of my students is a neighbor. She's off to college now. And actually, she's doing art, graphic
oh
art. So, but I'll run into a student every once in a while. And I did while I was teaching. And often some of them were young. So I could tell their parent, did you know that your child can write? This is quite wonderful. And most of the time they hadn't heard that. Nobody told. And then, but now my students are a lot grown up. I retired, I think, about 6 years ago, and they'll recognize me and they'll come up to me and they'll say hi and we'll talk. And I used to also teach them to memorize, to learn poems by heart. And we would recite Emily Dickinson's Hope is the Thing with Feathers. And we have a good Halloween crowd that comes through here, especially pre-pandemic. And groups of like middle schoolers would come in and say, it's Miss G, hey, and they'd start the poem and then we'd
oh
recite it together.
that's
That
wonderful.
was so much fun. That was unexpected and so much fun. So,
I really appreciated my Uncle Stanley taught me to memorize William Blake's poems when I was
oh,
a little
okay.
girl.
That's
And then he
great.
would have me see his college friends, and he'd stand, well, look what she can recite,
Great.
recite the tiger or the
Yeah, yeah,
lamb, or
yeah,
whatever and
exactly.
I've never forgotten them today, though
That's
my
right.
memory's getting a little bit
Mhm.
senior citizen-ish, but
Yeah.
those kind of poems that I said so many times so young, you
Mm,
can pull them out of your memory. It's
you can.
amazing.
Yes, it's
So you
wonderful.
planted memories in all those people's and
Yeah.
children, and that's a wonderful thing.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So I'm wondering now here about,
Mm.
we were talking about, we had a question about the healing qualities of the poem.
Mhm.
Is that something that you know, is that a specific thing, or what do you mean by that?
Well, I think telling the truth,
Mm-hmm.
poets, that's one thing we have to do. And so as a writer, discerning the truth, writing towards the truth is important. And then as a reader, oh, that bell of recognition. Oh, this is true. I know this from my life. Or I know this about the sun on daffodils, but I've never heard it this way, that kind of thing.
Right.
So, and, a poem can be quite musical. And of course, music is healing and they're rhythmic. And so the vibrations of the poem, the sound vibrations, can encourage perhaps a relaxation and an attunement to. Often poems have some kind of lesson or epiphany, so they can open one for for being receptive and slow down our breathing. I've read that poor Turkey, but in ancient times, thousands of people or hundreds of people would be in a hall and reciting poems together.
Wow.
Yeah, and of course, rhyme before the printing press, rhyme was very integral, and it helps us remember. So it must have been really something.
Yes. So could you share another poem with us now? Do you have
Yeah,
some more picked out?
be happy to. Yes. Uh, I think I'm going to read The Pharaoh's Daughter. And
And which book will that be from?
this is We Who
Who
Dream.
Dream. Great.
Okay. Mhm. Okay. Sorry. This is funny. Okay. The Pharaoh's Daughter. I don't care what you do with my body. Wrap me in twine. Pluck my eyes and heart and plunge them into patient strangers. Let that fat scribe write anything. Lies, endearments, praise. They're all the same on a windy day. Carry my ashes to our favorite spot and order me a Cabernet. Or leave them at home collecting dust on the mantle. Just make sure I've got an alabaster jug like Dad's. Oblivion and gin fill his, but leave mine empty. Let my spirit pour like oil and slip through the god's fingers, to return to a bed of rock, my only companion a turtle, my only weakness, love.
Beautiful. I was thinking about that you're married to a musician,
Yes.
that you're an artist with writing, and what
Mm-hmm.
a good compatible team the two of you make,
It,
because you both know how to respect each other's artistry, and you're
mm-hmm.
both coming from,
Mm-hmm.
know, I always call it kind of tapping into the zone. I don't know exactly. And when you're there,
Yeah.
the words in the poem just flows out, or the music just comes out on the piano.
Right.
So,
Rob composed a few songs for some of my poems, and we used to perform them about 10 years ago. It
oh,
was great.
really?
Yeah. Maybe we'll
That
do that again someday. Yeah.
that would have been, oh, I would have loved to have scheduled that on the show. Oh,
Oh,
that's
good.
great.
Well,
I didn't
maybe
know that.
sometime. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Mm,
that's a great collaboration
it
together.
was. Yeah. It was hard for me because he composed the songs. And so my musical knowledge is intuitive. I love to dance. I play a little recorder, no theory and no regular counting. So I really had to pay attention and come in at it was a discipline for me. I'm glad I could do it, but it was a learning curve.
Is there any other poets that you enjoy reading that you would want to share their names or their books to tell our audience of some other poetry books?
Sure.
Or like,
Sure.
who's your, like your
Yeah.
top two favorite poets?
Okay.
It must
Well,
be hard to do that, actually, but.
yeah. I love Sonia Sanchez.
Mhm.
She's in her 80s now. She's I don't want to say she's done it all, but she wrote a lot of haikus. She fell in love with haikus when she was 16, and she calls them sankus. And they're wonderful. I like her breadth, and right, there's so many. I got to study in college with Denise Levertov. She's no longer with us, but fabulous poet. I would recommend. A she would bring in. She was very smart and cultured, and so she would make these elements of culture. She would somehow, at the end, there would be a prayer there. How she did it. It was fabulous. It was great. And I also have a huge poetry crush on a French poet named Franck André Jam, who's no longer with us, but he very experimental and not always easy, but he would make these leaps constantly. And he was in Paris. He was René Char's secretary. He was English. No, he's French, pardon me. But he saw in Paris in the bookstalls these paintings on paper, old paper, and they were called, he later went to India to find the originals and called the book Tantra Songs. They're
Oh,
abstract, but also very yonis or different, and they're made in villages of tantrikas. But when he first went to India, he was in a terrible bus accident, and he had to go back home and recuperate for 2 years.
oh,
And then he went back, and he met someone, and on his way out the door, he said, wait a minute, wash your hands in this sand. I want you to wash your hands in this bowl of sand. And then the man looked at the sand. He said, okay, you come back to India, come back alone or with someone you love, and you go here. And he gave Jam, steered him to the Tantrika villages where this meditation practice was still going on. And there's a wonderful book called Tantra Song. It's a big, beautiful book from Siglio Press. You know, so he did experimental poems and grids and and mixed up, 36 poems mixed into 17. But I just, he leaves me speechless. I wish he was still alive, actually. Yeah. So
well, he's left, but at least he's left a piece of himself here to go on
yeah,
and on,
indeed. Yeah. Very playful.
which is a wonderful thing, just
Yeah.
like you, because these
Yeah.
books will go on. And now with the internet and things, this particular podcast will always be there. People will always hear these things.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, we're getting close to our hour, not too
Yeah.
far off. And I
Mhm.
was wondering, I want to just check about my questions I've had here for you.
Mhm.
I've pretty much gotten all of mine done here with you. That
Mhm.
started, could you share, all right, about stories of your students? Yeah,
Mhm.
start with poetry. Yes. So I was wondering if you might share just like, because your poems aren't that long and doesn't take up that much.
Right.
If there's 2 or 3 more you could share with us, and we could end with just a poetry reading,
Great. I'd
just
love
like we
to.
were at, an event of yours.
Yes. Oh, great. Good. Oh, I'd love that. I'm going to
Okay.
read from We Who Dream. And I think I'll read The Audacity of Rest. And this is, in terms of healing, this is about animal helpers
Mhm.
and how seeing these harbor seals taught me something. The audacity of rest. After mating for months in the sharky sea, harbor seals haul up at the river's mouth and heave themselves into hammocks of sand and dream of endless eels. Docents with binoculars patrol the sand, protecting them from us, daffy public out for exercise and adventure, halted by a snoring monument to laze and loll, a slow circus of siestas. Sleeping beauties full of octopus and squid, you are awake and we are dreaming. Teach us to keep a safe distance and drowse against each other as today sprints by.
I can see the goats rock and
Yeah.
and going to the point where the river goes in, and that's where all the seals are all laying like that.
Yeah.
And they do look very like they're very resting and having a really good rest there.
Yes. And they've been mating, so they're going to deliver their pups after a good rest. And yeah, it's amazing. It's just
So let's hear some more. I won't
Okay.
interrupt anymore.
no. No. Um, all right, I know. I'm getting there.
I'm loving having a different show like this.
Oh, good.
After 40 something shows of other, it's my first poetry one, and I'm really enjoying the experience.
Yeah, there are a lot of crossover. Well, I mean,
Mhm.
healing. I mean, Kim Rosen wrote that wonderful book, Saved by a Poem. And people, thank goodness, because not only writing it, but reading it
Yes, and hearing it.
and hearing it. Hearing it's good. Hearing it's good. This is called the Artichoke Sutra. The kelp mothers steer her along milky roads to the bright region inside the fog. Coastal lotuses with stalks like oak saplings shimmer in rows to the sea. Wild when time was counted in moons, owl-eyed food of goddess and surfer, glaucous sunflower of stubborn love, cleansing thistle of longevity, chakra of arms and hands. Our first shield also lifts and bears. Bountiful as the muscles ringing our shoulders, spine-tipped bracts open. With fervent teeth we scrape the meat, shave the choke to the flower bud we eat. My cousin cups a globe in her hands, scrumptious heart, core of the song. Remembering her sister, she offers it to me. Blood and oil attend, food of the blossom, hub of the blessing, such loss in flesh as well as sea, such silence in each song. Teach us how to bear, feed us as we mourn.
It's also the expression you give to the poem when you read it. It just really adds to, because having read some of them, having read your book here, and now hearing you voice them with the right sound, it just makes it just comes even more alive.
Yeah, thank you.
So-
Yeah, I grew up around, the baby beats and the beats and also spoken word. You want to communicate. And that's, I think, part of the poet's job is to read it, so you're communicating. So the words come alive in the space between the readers and yourself.
Well,
Thank you.
it's not often that, everyone I meet seems to be relocated from some other state and living in California. But I have a handful of actual people who are native Californians.
Yeah.
Were you born in San Francisco and raised in San Francisco?
I was conceived in San Francisco.
Oh, so you're pure San Franciscan.
Well, but my mother was from New York, so she took me back to New York, and then we came back to San Francisco, and then I was here until she remarried, and we moved around a bit, and then as soon as I could, I came back.
So did you get to be in San Francisco? Because I was in North Beach in 1970 and 1971.
A little
And-
later,
Yes, and I used to sit out at the bus stop in front of City Lights to catch my bus to go home. And, I was only a teenager, so I really, I didn't really know about the bookstore or what was going on. I just always was standing in front of it.
In front of it, yeah,
Now I know someone who had a debut there.
yeah, oh, yeah. And I,
So that was, and you got to be around North Beach, and were you there also in 1969 or during
no,
the
later,
times?
later,
Later?
later. It was the mid-70s and then late 70s and some early 80s, because I lived there,
Yes.
yeah, so yeah.
So I'd like to finish with one last poem, whether
I
it's
love that.
favorite or whichever one it is, they're all wonderful. So
Yeah, thank you.
audience,
Yeah,
pay
great.
attention.
Yeah, for some reason, I'm going to end with this one. It's called God's Mouth.
Okay.
It's beautiful when a whale blows her nose in the air. Through a crack in Miss Maloya's seawall, an iguana's sussing eyeball. 4 yellow butterflies in a gale. Torso boulders stripped by earthquake. Pelican eyes, wise with food. Sand scrapes blood from a boy's thigh. The rich keep trying to lock the beach. Nellie captains her own boat. I'm strong inside too. Up the canyon, women wash clothes in the laughing river. Children shriek. Frigate birds loom. Octopus fields, shrimp beds, a wealth of sewage. Love, God roars. Their breath, stinky, salty, sweet. Love.
That's a beautiful word to end on. I want to thank you so much for joining us here today. I hope our audience enjoyed all this beautiful poetry. I want to thank them for subscribing, listening, and sharing. And I hope that everyone has a very wonderful, fabulous week. And remember to share your stories, because stories can heal. Thank you.
Thank you.